what are we looking at now? A suburban party? A party that represents a non-urban, non-farm New America?
I don't think that's what you're looking at all, and I know that the convention planners have worked very hard, as well they should, to display what's happening in the Republican Party at the grassroots level all over this country. I remember the days when we used to hold meetings of black Republicans and the four of us would get together. Well, now we need a stadium, and I'm sure by the time we get together for the next convention it will be impossible for the media to overlook us because we'll be everywhere. And so I really don't blame the convention planners for trying to highlight those individuals and to showcase them, as well they should. African Americans, women, Hispanics, it's long overdue. They have long been attracted to the Republican Party and are making their way through the party hierarchy and taking leadership roles and positions, as well they should.
We've got two of our friends here doing books on Abraham Lincoln, and this was the party of Lincoln. I mean, this was the party that African-American citizens weren't citizens. They voted for Republicans, then shifted to the New Deal, and now maybe they're up for grabs again. I don't know.
Well, I think so. And you remember, I'm a Southern African-American, and so for me, to have the Republican Party vilified as racist or anti-women is absolutely hysterical, because I remember the Democrats that stood in the schoolhouse doors. And I remember that there were, in fact, racists that were in both parties. And so I don't think either party has a corner on that, and it's time we move far beyond that and judge people on the basis of their ideas and vilifying parties as being parties. It just doesn't serve any real purpose or contribute to the dialogue.
But I think the real question that we'll know a lot more about the answer to by the end of this week is this just an effort to put on a superficial happy face, a moderate face on a party that really is conservative? Or are these people who are saying, yes, we tried the way of Newt Gingrich, it didn't work, we really have begun to look at, to use a term that these people on the floor would loathe because it's a Bill Clinton term, a third way, a conservatism that does make a bow toward issues that are interesting to Democrats, like health, education, and the environment.
And when you look at the platform, it still is predominantly a conservative platform, although George Bush has broken on education. No longer do they talk about abolishing the Department of Education because he wants to use public resources to make education better. And it's gotten softer on immigration. I mean, they were really tough in those previous platforms against immigrants and people coming into the country, and hopefully it reflects a substantive change as well.
Well, we'll be hearing from you all for the rest of the week. We've made a good start. Thank you.
This Republican convention, like all political conventions, is also generating protests and other events outside the convention hall. Kwame Holman has our report on what happened on that front today.
This morning, more than 1,000 protesters began to stage at City Hall for the first of the week's major demonstrations. Marchers from across the country chose economic equality and an end to homelessness as the theme for day one. Negotiations between protesters and the city of Philadelphia had failed to produce an agreement that would allow a march down the city's main north-south thoroughfare, Broad Street. As things stood, police were prepared to arrest anyone who stepped off the sidewalk. As they said they would, marchers attempted to enter Broad Street and walk the 3.5 miles to the First Union Center, site of the Republican National Convention. In a surprising response, Philadelphia police retreated.
I thought that maybe they would let us go a few blocks and then try to block it, but they really insisted all the way along with traffic and everything else.
But in fact, police let the march continue for more than 2 miles, assisting with traffic control along the way. Activists like Marianne Baker stayed focused on the message as they walked.
We want to get the message across that there should be universal health care for all. There should not be people living on the street just as the richest country in the world. Why should we have poor?
Today's crowd was small compared to yesterday, when more than 5,000 marched from downtown along Benjamin Franklin Parkway in a city-approved demonstration. The theme was Unity 2000, as demonstrators voiced opposition to a nuclear missile defense system, the death penalty, and the Republican conventioneers' recently adopted anti-abortion plank in the party platform. No arrests have been made so far this week, and Philadelphia Police Commissioner John Timoney says there's no reason that has to change.
Arrest for us is a kind of a last resort. We're looking to bend over backwards to see if we can facilitate some kind of a compromise. However, you know, some people don't want to compromise. They don't want to. Some actually don't even want to meet with us. We'll kind of deal with them when we meet them. So it's, you know, we've been quite clear in our message to demonstrators and protest. Everybody's welcome. Please don't engage in violence or, you know, serious property damage, and we can live with almost everything else.
As for today's unapproved march, Timoney's officers diverted it to a park well away from where Republican delegates were meeting, and marchers complied. Police officials said they decided to allow the partial demonstration after discussions with leaders among the activists. But protesters say there are more unsanctioned events planned as the week goes on.
Now some summary words from Shields and Gigot, syndicated columnist Mark Shields, Wall Street Journal columnist Paul Gigot. The bottom line, Paul, is what would constitute a successful convention for the Republican Party and George W. Bush?
If George W. Bush can make a majority of the American people comfortable with the idea of him as President of the United States. If you read the polls, the voters giving him a lead, 5 to 6% in almost every poll, sometimes more, but roughly that. They're saying they're prepared to make a change in the party in the White House. Al Gore, they know him somewhat. They don't much like him. He can't seem to pop above 40, the low 40s in the polls. But they haven't quite, George W. Bush hasn't quite sealed the deal yet as the man who could replace him. And he has to make them comfortable with him as a man, with his character and leadership ability, and then substantively show them that this is not just all cosmetic. There's also some ideas here and things he would do as president.
Mark?
I would agree with Paul. I would say that in addition, there can be no strident pessimism. There could be no negative message coming out of this. And it has to be a smirk-free zone for George W. Bush. He cannot, there can't be, in body language or appearance, there can't be that sense of sort of self-congratulatory or self-satisfaction. I would add to that, Jim, the statement made by Karl Rove, the Bush's campaign strategist, this morning at the Sperling breakfast with reporters, in which he pointed out that the Republicans, this has been the easy part up until now, that George W. Bush at this point has consolidated the Republican base, and that this convention is about talking to the American people. The top record in the history of American politics of any nominee was Ronald Reagan in 1984. He got 94% of Republicans who voted for him on Election Day, which is just unprecedented.
Yeah.
George Bush right now is at 89% of Republicans in the Bush counting, I mean, which is just really unprecedented, especially for this stage. And now they've got to understand they're not going to get the bounce from Republicans. They've got to reach out to other voters.
So they're going with the... Go ahead. Yes, I'm sorry.
That's a huge... What Mark talks about is correct, and it's a huge strategic advantage because it means he can use this convention, use his speech to reach out to that broad middle. He doesn't have to do what Bob Dole had to do in '96 and his father had to do in 1992, which was use the convention to mobilize the base.
To look over his right shoulder the whole
That's right.
time.
That's right.
Yeah. But so the Bush people have bought into the conventional historical wisdom that this is the time that the great majority of the electorate starts paying attention. These conventions, right?
Well, I wouldn't say starts paying attention, but really takes a big focus. I mean, I think the campaign thinks there are three big challenges, have been three big challenges for him, when people will tune in a more than cursory way. One was the vice presidential choice, which I think the George W. Bush passed. The third will be the debates. Those are to come in the fall. The second is this week, and in particular, the overall message that's sent by the convention, in particular, the acceptance speech on Thursday.
Do you agree that Bush has passed the vice presidential thing? There's been an awful lot of stuff about Cheney's record. Where does that, how do you read that now?
I don't think they passed it. I just add one thing based upon Margaret, what Paul said. Margaret won his interview with Olympia Snow and Gary Barr and Vin Weber. Gary Barr said 10 years ago, you can't build a lasting political movement on opposition to government. And boy, I think that turned out to be prophetic.
Who said that?
Gary Bauer
Gary Bauer
did,
said
10
that.
years ago in 1990. And this is not an anti-government Republican Party. I mean, I think that's an important thing to understand. And I think that's been George Bush's
Do you think
message.
that's real? I mean, do you think it's tone? You think it's
I think it's more than
show?
tone. I think it's more
real?
than tone. I mean, let's abolish the Department of Education. I think that I think it's there in substance, a recognition when they say, George Bush's spokesman said to me at the platform committee hearings, we believe that federal government can play an effective role in education. That's a difference, Jim, from
We'll
where
come
we've
back
been.
to Cheney in a minute.
Okay.
Let's stay on this for a second, Paul. What do you think about the discussions we've heard, beginning with the interview with Tommy Thompson and everything that's come up till now? Where do you come down on this? Has the party really changed in your opinion, or what?
I do think so.
You do think?
Yeah, I do. I think that it's for 30 years in this country, conservatism defined itself by what it was against. It was against the evil empire. It was against the New Deal. It was against the Great Society. It was rolling those things back. I think what happened, the shock of winning the Congress finally in 1994, and then coming up so short in 96, and having Bill Clinton define the party fairly or unfairly in many ways, in my view, but define the party as extreme, was a shock to the Republican Party. And it said that we can no longer succeed. I think it taught a lot of Republicans, particularly the governors, that we can no longer succeed as an insurgent conservatism. We have to show what we're for, and we have to be able to address problems that people want to address on issues we haven't been effectively addressing in the past: Social Security, education, health care. And that's what Bush has done. This is not just a tax cut, crime, and welfare platform. In fact,
it's real.
I think it's real.
I'm not sure it's real. I think Paul's right. They are addressing them. I'm not sure that the solutions or the programs are real.
Well,
but I think
yeah.
that's right. That's exactly right. But what is the dominant emotion in this city among these 4,000 delegates and alternates is the great maxim of Chicago city politics is don't make waves and don't back losers. They're not making waves, and they think that they're going to win it.
Yeah. Okay, Cheney. Let's pick up on Cheney. What do you think?
Well,
you were about to answer,
I think it was the first false start I've seen in the Bush folks. I mean, what really had to upset them was that the Democrats were quicker off the mark on Dick Cheney than they were. The Democrats were there with the charges and the specifics on his record, and it took them 2-3 days trying out answers and backpedaling, tweak the record and backing off that. And now, yes, different times. I would vote differently now. Yes, Governor Bush does make a case. I'd be for child lock for guns. I mean, I don't think Dick Cheney has been sure-footed. Now, what works for Dick Cheney is the persona. The public persona is not that of Newt Gingrich. You can give him Newt Gingrich's voting record, but you can't give him Newt Gingrich's personality.
I think Mark is making tactical points that he's right. Cheney hasn't been as sure-footed, but in the end, it doesn't matter. I mean, I don't think. I mean, the LA Times poll showed that 20% of the public said they were more likely to vote for Bush because of Cheney. Only 10% said they were less likely to vote for him. 53 to 15 people have a favorable view of Cheney. I think that's one of the reasons that the Democrats came out so hard to try to define him, because they see that was a choice that was actually helping Bush.
I don't think so. I'll tell you why I think the Democrats did what they did. I think the Democrats, this is a race for the middle. We're seeing two parties rushing for the middle. Bill Clinton, the George W. Bush campaign is the Bill Clinton campaign of 1992. He's following the same route to the convention.
They're just coming from a different direction.
That's all the same thing. And what the Democrats were trying to say is, look, this guy says he's a middle fella, but look, his first choice, the first guy he chose, has a voting record to the right of Dick Armey and Newt Gingrich. Do you really think that he is this new Republican?
It's not going to work because he's not. It's not true. Dick Cheney is a moderate man. I mean, and his temperament shows
personality.
A moderate personality, and his voting record in 1985 is not relevant to running in 2000.
Well, let me, before we leave this, you both mentioned Newt Gingrich. I read a Wire story this afternoon that pointed out the dramatic fall of this man. He's around in one of these sky booths as an analyst for Fox Television News. And remember, just 4 years ago, he was almost as popular, in fact, is more powerful than the presidential nominee, Bob Dole. And that's